Hello everybody. So this week we're going to be looking at widgets for an objective type system. So make sure I got the right screen up. Yes, I do. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll go over to the engine, do a quick play here to demonstrate what we're doing. Okay, so in the beginning we have to gather resources, get stone, wood, and berries. We currently have 0 out of 500. And then we have a little narrative box here in the center. Would have liked to have done like a fade in, fade out type thing, but it's been a rough week with the motorcycle accident and everything. So it's just going to be static there for now. Basically, you come up, collect resources. 500 was quite a bit. Rather would have done something like 50, but the class requirement was 500. So you shatter your stone. There's 150. There's 300. Normally it would have been 5 stone per collection, but I don't feel like collecting 500 resources 5 at a time. I think each person should be able to individually set the goal requirement for their assignment, but school project said 500. So we're getting my 500. Okay, there's our 500. As soon as you hit your 500, it switches over to objective 2, build a shelter. Make building blocks to get started on a shelter. The requirement was to make or craft 5 building blocks. There was no requirement to actually place them down. Narrative, now that we have some resources, build a shelter, protect yourself from the elements. So open up our crafting window with the C, and if I build just one item, you can see, make building blocks get shorter. We have 1 out of 5. Okay, let's build 2 more. Updated 3. Build 2 more. Okay, we met our 5. So I switched over to you win. And then from there, you could, if you wanted to, you could build and do all that other great stuff. All right, too easy. And that was all the requirement was for this week. How did we do this? Okay, so in the blueprint HUD, I went ahead and added a objectives widget, and then we set our we get our current objective. It's by default set as objective 1 here in the corner, and we feed it into a set objectives text function. Okay, our internal function here. So set objective function. This is like the first time you're setting the objective for each objective. It grabs that current row name that we set up, sets it in here, pulls from a data table that we'll look at in a minute here, calls a function set objectives that's set in C++. With the current counter of 0 as if we're doing it from the beginning, and then go ahead and adds it to the viewport. And then we also have a update objective item count. So anytime we get items, we can call this function inside other classes or blueprints to update just the count. It'll pull in the current row name from the data table to get all the information, but we're going to go update our count to the current item count. And that'll give that, X of whatever the requirement is, so 5 of 100, 7 of 100, like that. And then it, make sure it's up there on there. And then it's kind of sloppy, but this is what I was able to come up with the time I had allotted. We find out what the current objective is. If it's equal to 1, if it's true, then we check, does the objective requirement, is it greater than equal to the item count? So in this case, it's pulling the current item quantity. A little bit sloppy on that one because it's pulling from the resources window. If that is true, then it resets the current objective item count to 0, changes the current objective to objective number 2, and updates the set objective text, which comes back up to this one here, pulling in objective number 2 and setting everything by default. If the current objective count is greater than or equal to the objective requirement, in this case objective number 2 this time, and the current objective is objective number 2, then we'll go ahead and increment to reset our back down to 0 and increment to objective number 3. So this is not a very dynamic system, but it meets the requirement for now. Definitely something I want to improve on in the future. Looking at our data table, okay, so we have a data table here built off a C++ struct. We set our objective 1, objective 2, objective 3 for the row name. That lets us set what objective to display on the screen. By default, the objective complete is set to false. We go ahead and type in a summary. So let's see, gather resources. I gather resources. I have a subtask array also built on a struct. That task checks, is that subtask complete? What is the item count required for that particular subtask item? And a little summary of what text we want to be. And then for the overall objective, there is narrative text, which is not part of the subtask. Narrative text here. And you can have multiple subtasks, like you could break out, gather 100 stone, 100 wood, 100 berries, and then it would track each item. And then as each item is marked complete, um, then once all the items are marked complete, then it'll go ahead and mark the overall objective complete and transition to the next objective. So I just have the collect the resources, build the 5 items, and then congratulations, you win, just so it has an increment. The demonstration video actually just had it quitting the game, which I thought was kind of odd. For after you make 5 items, it just randomly quits. So I just had it pop up, you win, for this week. Okay. So that was the HUD. When you're in crafting mode, what it does is there's a little check here. When you hit click for craft, it gets the HUD. Look, only if it's objective number 2, it'll run this one here. It'll get the current item counts. It'll add the quantity of building items that you want to do, and it'll set that as the current objective items. And then it will go ahead and call from the HUD our update objective item count um, to update our widget display for us. So that way it says like 1 of 5, 2 of 5, 4 of 5, like that. Looking in the C++, okay, so I built a data library. So this data library is for all of my stuff. Um, our building block tables and stuff like that. But here we have the subtask data. It's just like when we're looking at the data table where it's pulled from. We have B is complete, the item count, subtask summary, and then to set the initial values, B is complete is set to false by default, and item count is set to -1. If the player sets it to anything other than -1, then it'll actually go ahead and make a requirement to gather items. If it's set to -1, it actually skips over that as an item requirement. And then we go into the overall objective data, which we add public ftable row base. That way we can make a data table in Unreal Engine for that. We have is objective completed, the objective summary, the struct for the subtask data, which we made a T-array, so you can have multiple subtasks within the objective that we defined just above, and then you have the narrative as an F string, and then by default we set B is objective completed to false. All right, then we come over here to the objective.h. Simple widget here, so we're using the prefix W for widget, and then objectives, technique that I saw in some of the Unreal Engine courses that they have on their website that they've actually created on naming some of their C++ files. So I like that W prefix for that way I know this is a widget class. It's built upon the user widget. I have one function for set objectives where I pass in the struct objectives data that we just looked at, and I also look at a current count value that goes in, so that way whatever the event is, you can pass in the current count. If you have more than one subtask that has items that need to be counted, then it would actually have to be passing in an array, so that I'd have to come back in and change the code, which is something to look at for the future. For that widget, we have a bind widget for the summary text, a bind widget for a vertical box of a subtask list, and the bind widget for the narrative block. That gave us that, if you saw in the top here, that gives us our task here. This is a vertical box that can be expanded out by the number of tasks, and our narrative box right here in the center. Which I can pull that up real quick. So the UI, we didn't look at that actually. Objectives, widget blueprint objectives. So we have our objective box, which has to be named objective summary text to match in with the bind widget. We have our vertical box here, which is empty, and what it does is it loops through the arrays and it adds in those elements in there. And then our narrative text here, set as narrative text. I put a border around it just to give it that little bit of shading to it. All right, and then looking at the C++ for the objectives. So we link into our data library, pass in our parameters. If we have an objective summary text, go ahead and set our text from the struct. We want to set text. We want to make it an f text from string. If there's a subtask list, we want to clear any children that might be in there from previous views. Otherwise, every time it updates the widget, it'll just keep adding more and more children, duplicates. And then we're going to loop through our subtasks. So for subtasks in our objective array of subtasks, we're going to look at make a subtask text. We're going to make it a new object, and if there's a subtask text, we'll start building a string, and we're going to have two substrings displayed up in there. The first one is if B is completed for the task, it's going to append completed to the front of the text for the substring. And then if the item count is other than -1, then it's going to append 2% D, so it's going to append the current item count and the struct item count with a slash separating them. And then if the current item count is greater than the item count, then it's also going to use a completed for the subtask, and then it's going to put the rest of the substring that we defined above just below that, or just after that. So the completed will go at the front of that substring text. Otherwise, it's just going to say that substring task is not complete, which we'll look at later as in checking. It's going to check if all of the tasks are, if any of the tasks are marked as not complete or any of them are false, then the overall it is false. And then we're going to go ahead and take our subtask text, and we're going to go ahead and pass that string into it and set it. And then we're going to look at our list, and we're going to add children for each of those. After we've created the text string or the f text, we're going to make a child based upon that f text inside the vertical box. This is similar to how we did our crafting, except crafting was a sub widget. In this case, we're doing a string to the vertical box as a child. And then if there is a narrative text, then we go ahead and set the narrative text to whatever it might be. At the end here, what we do is we create a struct for the modifiable object, passing in the information, and then modifiable object, is it complete? If all the subtasks are complete, then the overall objective Boolean will be marked as complete, and then it will transition to the next objective. Okay, that pretty much covers it all. We needed to look at the um, what is it called? The bit bucket. Okay, so looking at the bit bucket here, I have my beautiful bit bucket here with the pull requests and the source. The import is just some imported meshes that I had, and that's that. Went through the code, we covered the objectives, I demonstrated the objectives being completed, so that finishes out this week. Hope everybody enjoyed the vehicle or the video, and hopefully I'll be able to make a better one next week once I recover better from this motorcycle accident. All right, y'all have a good week. Bye.